A few months ago, I was kicking around the idea of doing a few movie reviews. And I got partway into writing something, but it wasn't really going anywhere, and after the change the channel movement, I think that style of linear point-for-point, joke-heavy review kind of fell out of fashion. There's a few people still doing it that I do genuinely enjoy, but the whole format seems kind of passé to me. So instead I thought I'd just do something a bit more freeform. This is less a review and more just a few recommendations. These are some 50s sci-fi and horror movies I like. Check them out. Number 1. The Monster That Challenged the World was the movie I was originally going to review. And you know something? It's alright. It's not the best movie of its kind. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's a fun little romp with what I'd consider the most perfect setting for a 50s giant radioactive arthropod movie. An Air Force base in the desert. Oh shit, it's actually a naval base, but they mostly fly planes. It's at a little lake in the desert. Also, the professor character is played by Hans Conried. That name may not mean much to you, but listen to his voice.
I'm Dr. Rogers, Commander.
Does it sound familiar?
Johns! Johns! Answer me, Johns!
I'm okay. Blake! It got Blake!
What are you talking about?
How about now?
If I could only find his hideout, I'd trap him in his lair. But where is it?
If more of us valued your ways, food and cheer above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world.
Really solid effects, too. I mean, that is clearly a full-size puppet on set with everybody. It's not a cheap little thing in a cheap old process shot or a rear projection shot. No, that is... someone put a lot of work into this. It's kind of an odd movie, really, in some ways. There's this almost running gag about people offering each other food, which is usually declined.
Got tuna fish and minced ham on rye.
No thanks.
Want to stop at the Four Oaks for a beer?
Told Betty I'd come right home after our shift.
I found a wonderful place to eat in Mexicali.
Well, thank you, but I can't leave, Connie. I mean, I shouldn't.
Okay. Want to stop and get some breakfast?
Oh, no, thanks. I had toast and coffee when I got up, but if you want to stop.
No, I can wait.
I know it's way past dinner time, but if you haven't already eaten,
Yeah, I'm starving.
Oh my god, someone's actually gonna eat something in this movie. There's also this whole thing about closing the beaches and swimmers disappearing that I am positive was an influence on Jaws.
I don't care. Give it to me. It's mine. I found it. I don't care.
There's some kids out there with a sailor's cap.
Give it to me. I don't care.
I don't care!
I don't care.
I don't care!
I don't care.
So yeah, Monster That Challenged the World. Really generic title, decent movie. Number 2. Aw, fuck yes, it's Them! Them is the gold standard of the 50s giant bug movie. This film just has it all. Oscar-nominated effects, multiple Wilhelm screams throughout. Really memorable and likable characters, particularly those played by Edmund Gwynn and the great James Whitmore.
If you finish, say over and out.
But she knows I'm through talking.
I know she does, Doctor. It's a rule, though. You gotta say it. Isn't that right, General?
Right, sir. This is ridiculous. A lot of good your rules are going to do us if we don't locate
Over
them.
and out.
Oh, now you're happy.
And a story that was, at the time, groundbreaking, but kind of became a staple for most of the movies that followed in its footsteps. See, the film starts off almost as like a mystery movie. There's a few strange occurrences in the desert, missing people, and then... ants! Ants! Now that is just an amazing shot. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how the movie's subterranean scenes, the ants' desert colony, and later in a second colony in the storm drains of Los Angeles, directly inspired a lot of the stuff in Aliens. Right down to finding a little kid hiding in a side tunnel. In fact, this movie basically invented the entire sci-fi convention of a war against giant bugs. So Robert Heinlein, that fascist hack, can fuck right off. And one final thing about this movie, supposedly Walt Disney watched it because someone had suggested that James Whitmore would be a good fit for the role of Davy Crockett. Instead, Disney ended up really impressed by this very brief performance from a young Fess Parker and ended up casting him instead.
You think I'm crazy? Well, I don't care what you think, I'm not. I saw those things with my own 2 eyes. You think anybody could make up a story like that? A guy'd have to be nuts to make... I mean...
Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier.
But don't feel too bad for James Whitmore either. He did fine. He got 3/4 of the way to an EGOT, endorsed Obama in 2008, and was in Planet of the Apes.
Answer the question, Dr. Zira. Is it a man?
Oh, and he was in some kind of prison movie with Tim Robbins, I think. Number 3. I'm kind of going in reverse order here when it comes to the giant monster movies. Monster that challenged the world, of course, wouldn't exist without them, and them wouldn't exist without The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. In fact, I have both movies on the same DVD. Even though dinosaurs weren't really a staple of 50s movies, not really catching on till 60s movies like 1 Million Years BC and, God help you, Irwin Allen's version of The Lost World.
What could it have been? Well, hazarding a guess, I would say we've just been visited by a fully grown specimen of Jurassic dinosaur, of the order Sauropida, in other words, a Brontosaurus. Brontosaurus.
But they did crop up here and there. And this movie's Redosaurus, a fictional creature animated beautifully by stop-motion legend Ray Harryhausen, is a wonderfully memorable creature. But most importantly, this was the first movie where the giant monster was specifically tied to the atomic bomb. That's a milestone right there. Like them, this movie also launched what would quickly become a cliche. Starting your movie with a documentary-style sequence set in the Arctic, and then our brave hero sees the monster, but nobody else believes him at first. You can see this exact same setup done in The Deadly Mantis, for instance, a movie that did not make this list.
And then this most dangerous monster that ever lived challenged the security of our city.
This trailer read by L from Light and Dark. And there's another 50s monster movie I could name that started this way too, but I'll get to that in a minute. This movie also has some pretty good human characters. I watched this movie plenty as a kid, and I was never bored during the dialogue scenes. Although there is one bit at a ballet that is, frankly, filler. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Also, this movie's professor character, because, you gotta have a professor character, he's just the sweetest old man. I love this guy.
Dr. Lawton was firmly convinced that leprechauns were responsible for the uprooting of the ancient campus oak, even swearing upon oath that he had seen them remove it.
But, let's not joke ourselves. We're here for the Redosaurus rampage scenes, and they are glorious! Fuck the police. Also of note, does this sniper look familiar? He should. Because that's Lee Van Cleef. Number 4. Now, The Beast in 20,000 Fathoms was the first nuclear monster movie, but the best was undeniably Gojira. And I'm using the Japanese pronunciation here, not to be pretentious, but because the Japanese Gojira and the American release of Godzilla are genuinely different movies. The American one has a lot of material cut, and they also shot a bunch of scenes of Raymond Burr clumsily inserted into the plot.
He claimed he saw a monster, a horrible monster.
He saw a monster. He's had too much sake.
Ah, yes, sake, that terrible hallucinogen.
My name is Steve Martin.
I was born a poor black child.
Huh. And in general, it is more of a straightforward monster movie. It has its charms, but Ishiro Honda's original film, Gojira, is a genuine masterpiece. Now, so far, I've been talking about entertaining, pulpy adventure movies, and this is the first on this list I consider a truly great film. It will break your goddamn heart. And to a lot of Western viewers, that is genuinely surprising. We're so used to Godzilla being, this, that it can catch us a little off guard to see it be this. Holy fuck. Now, sure, Godzilla is a man in a suit, but it's honestly it's a pretty decent suit. And the movie's moody lighting prevents the goofy, dead-eyed look he'd get in some of the later films in the series. This is one of the more surprising movies on this list, and with one possible exception, it is by far the best movie here. Number 5. Time to mix things up a little. Now, so far I've been talking about movies that were, at the very least, pretty good. Movies I could enjoy on their own terms in the way they were intended to be enjoyed. So now let's take a moment to talk about a movie that's really not very good at all. It's number 5 on the list, but it really should have been number 9.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts about grave robbers from outer space?
I am far from the first person to talk about this movie on the internet, so I'll be very brief. I am surprised how few of my friends, and these are people who love The Room and who love Birdemic, how few of them have seen this movie. Maybe you haven't, that's okay. Because if you haven't, you have quite a treat coming up. Because whether you've seen it or not, when you think of an entertainingly bad 50s sci-fi movie, this is the movie that you are thinking of. This movie gave us the tools we need to enjoy The Room. Here's a few highlights.
First his wife, then he.
Tragic. Holy mackerel.
What in the world?
That's nothing from this world.
Because all you of Earth are idiots. Future events such as these will affect you in the future.
How about you and me balling it up in Albuquerque?
You see? You see? Your stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid! That's all I'm taking from you. Get back here, you...
I love this movie. This stupid, incompetent, miserable movie. Number 6. Another not-so-good movie I want to talk about is The Giant Claw. Now, maybe this is a movie you're already aware of, so when I play a clip of it in a minute, you already know what to expect. Maybe not. I just want to preface this by saying that most of the movie is actually pretty decent. It's not Gojira good, but easily, monster that challenged the world good. It's got 50s scream queen Morricone in the lead role.
Where did that impulse come from?
Left field, maybe.
I like baseball.
Morricone, queen of the sexy eye roll. She's the perfect blend of bookish and really hot, which is exactly what you want in this kind of cheesy 50s movie.
Or maybe just sitting next to a pretty girl. That's enough in itself sometimes.
Even sitting next to Mademoiselle Mathematician?
There are figures and there are figures.
The dialogue is hokey but charming, even if everyone keeps comparing the monster to a flying battleship for, no reason.
Battleship.
Battleship. Battleship.
Battleship.
Battleship.
Battleship.
Battleship. Battleship.
And the story isn't super creative, since it jacks pretty much its entire first act from Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Yeah, remember what I said about documentaries, the Arctic, and nobody believing the hero about what he saw? This movie does all of that, point for point, completely by the numbers. But I do have to give it credit for being one of the few movies I've ever seen where the monster really does seem to be holding the whole world in a grip of terror. And the global threat is an immediate one, not just in the abstract, not just we have to destroy the eggs or else this species could one day, maybe, I don't know, replace humanity as the dominant species on Earth. This is already the dominant thing on Earth. Now that I've said what's good about this movie, let's take a look at its biggest problem. You know, they were this close to hiring Ray Harryhausen. This close. Number 7. Let's take a break from giant monster movies and focus on a monster that's just fairly tall. Let's talk about one of the greatest horror actors of all time. Let's talk about Vincent Price. Now, Price had a long and rich and somewhat repetitive career because, let's face it, he got typecast in horror.
Now that we've seen the last of Dracula, the Wolfman and the monster, there's nobody to frighten us anymore.
Oh, that's too bad. I was hoping to get in on the excitement.
Who said that?
Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the Invisible Man.
But he did tons of movies throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s I could recommend, even a few films in the 90s before he passed away. But I think the best entry point to his movies was 1959's House on Haunted Hill. And this is also kind of the perfect haunted house movie. I mean, it's not as suspenseful as The Shining, it's not as visually stunning as Crimson Peak, or as unsettling as The Haunting, but what this movie does have is a sense of fun. It literally is like going to a haunted house. Please forgive the really bad picture quality in this transfer that I'm showing you clips from. You can get it on DVD and it looks so much better than this. The setup is... it's just great. The setup is that Vincent Price and his wife, played by Carol Omart, who is something of a horror icon in her own right, they throw a fancy party in a supposedly haunted house rented from Alicia Cook Jr., who is always great. And everyone who attends gets locked in overnight, but they'll receive a spectacular sum of money if they can survive the night.
They share one thing. They all need money. Now let's see if they're brave enough to earn it.
Now that is just a brilliant setup, and it's all I'm going to tell you. Beyond these cryptic words of warning. Spooky, scary skeletons send shivers down your spine. Number 8. Alright, somewhat embarrassing confession here. I've never seen the original Day the Earth Stood Still. I'm sure it's excellent. I'm not a super big fan of the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, although the 70s remake is one of the scariest movies ever made, in my opinion. Plus, you know, everything is just better with Jeff Goldblum. Now, I bring both these up because I'd like to talk about a less well-known film that kind of blends elements of both. I say less well-known, even though it did have the honor of a name drop in Rocky Horror.
Then at a deadly pace, it came from outer space.
Now, I like this movie already, because it's a 50s sci-fi set in the desert. It's like the perfect setting for this kind of movie. Our hero is a gorfy young astronomer who spots something mysteriously fall from the sky, only to be covered up in a giant rock slide, and wouldn't you know it, nobody will believe it exists. Now, after that, strange things start happening. The people he knows are acting weird. Have they been possessed by the aliens? Duplicated by the aliens? Are the aliens here to conquer, or can they be reasoned with? Now, what's great about this movie is it keeps you guessing. And I think that taps much better into Cold War-era paranoia than anything as clear-cut as Body Snatchers, because for the vast majority of this film, we're uncertain about the motivations of the aliens. They're not obviously evil, like the Body Snatchers, but they're not obviously good, like, say, E.T. either. All that suspense, it really keeps you invested. And even when at times you really want to trust them, there's always just this little lingering doubt in the back of your mind. Are they going to betray that trust? Watch a movie and find out. Number 9. Now, most of these movies have been strictly science fiction. The 50s were the nuclear age, after all. New horizons in science were opening up, ones that could enrich our lives, but also ones that could end our lives. On a massive scale, one undreamed of before the Second World War. Don't worry, I'm not going to recommend Beast of Yucca Flats. I'm just showing some footage from it. That movie is garbage. Atomic mutants, aliens, Russian spies. These are all the fears of modernity. At least, that's how it was in America. Britain, on the other hand, seemed to want to retreat into a pre-war mindset. It was in the 50s, after all, that Hammer Studios started remaking a lot of the old 30s Universal horror movies, most of them based on 19th century British novels. Hammer made their own versions of Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy. But the movie I really want to talk about wasn't a Hammer film. The director wasn't even an Englishman. But it was referenced in Rocky Horror, albeit a little bit more obliquely.
Dana Andrews said Cruz gave him the ruse, and passing them used lots of skill.
It's called Night of the Demon, or Curse of the Demon in its American release, and it dives right into the tension between rational modernity and superstition. So Dana Andrews plays Dr. John Holden. He's a sort of a debunker hoping to bust up this quasi-satanic cult led by the amiable but highly unsettling Julian Carswell.
I have what is perhaps the finest library in the world on witchcraft and the black arts.
I'm getting a very Donald Pleasance vibe off of this guy. And as the investigation proceeds, Holden and his colleagues begin to suspect that Carswell has a means of cursing his enemies, passing them runes, marking them as the next victims of the demon. Now, director Jacques Tourneur, known for some really great 40s horror movies like Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie, he was vehemently opposed to actually showing the demon. A lot of Tourneur's movies are kind of non-committal over whether anything genuinely supernatural is happening or not. And he wanted to leave open the strong possibility that maybe there is no demon, just that its victims believe so firmly in its existence that they end up dying of fright. And that would have been cool. The studio did end up filming scenes of the demon, and although I think I have to agree with Tourneur that not showing it probably would have been a better call, I do have to say this is an excellent design. It's really hard to make the classic Batwing Devil genuinely frightening, and I think this movie does a great job. The other problem with this movie is its unfortunate use of brownface.
Absolutely. Well, now that we're all here, let's get down to business.
Number 10. So, when you think of movies about Sasquatch and Yeti, what you're mostly thinking of is low-budget, direct-to-DVD, Sci-Fi Network shit. Aside from Harry and the Hendersons, there's not much that's actually good in this particular corner of the monster movie genre. Not much, but there is some. Oh hey, it's a Hammer movie after all. This is The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas. And the somewhat generic title is actually pretty apt, because this is the archetypal Yeti movie. It gives exactly what a movie with that title should give. Now, this may sound like I'm calling it a predictable movie, and in a few ways it is, but honestly, that's what makes it so satisfying. What twists there are feel just right. And even though this movie was clearly filmed on a soundstage in Britain, I think they do an excellent job building up a sense of almost cosmic dread around the Yeti, which takes on some truly supernatural aspects in a few scenes. I'd put this in the same tradition as John Carpenter's The Thing, in how it uses an isolated, snowy setting to build up a sense of real unease. It's also like a Lovecraft story sometimes, in how little it shows us how high the story's stakes really are, regardless of whether its protagonists live or die.
Remember that you act in the name of mankind and act humbly. For man is near to forfeiting his right to lead the world. He faces destruction by his own hand now. When a ruler, king, is near death, he should not be seeking to extend his realm, but take thought. Who might with honor succeed him?
And also, you may have noticed from the clips I've shown that this movie features a young Peter Cushing in one of his very first starring roles, so that's cool. I mean, young-ish. The man was born at the age of 40. Number 11. Let's go back to Vincent Price for a minute. No, actually, let's talk about William Castle.
Come in. William Castle, the producer of this motion picture, has a question for you.
And Castle was the master of in-theater gimmicks for his movies. Theater showing House on Haunted Hill, for instance, would have spooky, scary skeletons floating around on a wire, obviously, above the audience's heads during key scenes. 13 Ghosts gave viewers these special glasses, allowing them to see the ghosts hidden in certain shots. Mr. Sardonicus claimed to let the audience vote at the end on whether the title character deserved mercy or not, though as far as we can tell, they never actually filmed the merciful ending.
No mercy. So be it.
And one of his most ambitious gimmicks was for a little film called The Tingler. Now, The Tingler's premise already sounds a bit gimmicky. Vincent Price plays a scientist who discovers a parasitic life form inside everybody's spine. It feeds on fear, and when you're scared, you can feel the thing moving around. That's the tingle down your spine when in the grip of terror. And the only way to vent that fear so that the tingler can't grow too big and just break out of you is by screaming. So naturally, the climax of the movie has a massive tingler escaping into this theater, and the audience are instructed to scream as loudly as possible to keep it at bay.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic, but scream! Scream for your lives! The tingler is loose in this theater.
Best of all, apparently Castle had these little electrical buzzers hidden in some of the seats, so they'd vibrate during the scene. You'd feel that extra tingle.
And remember this, a scream at the right time may save your life.
And of course, you know, I'm recommending this movie to you now on home media, DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, or whatever, which means a lot of the gimmickry here is just historical trivia. But even without that, honestly, this is still a wickedly entertaining movie. The premise may be a little bit out there, but the way it blends the emotion of fear with visceral body horror actually kind of feels like the forerunner to some of the stuff David Cronenberg would do later on, especially in The Brood.
Show me your anger, show me, then I can understand it.
And, of course, Price is his usual unsettling self. There's an amazing scene where he does LSD as part of a fear experiment. He's intentionally giving himself a really bad acid trip. And I've read that this was the first movie to ever depict someone using LSD, so that's cool. And Price, he just sells it so hard.
The room is closing in on me. You've got to make it stop. The walls. The walls. The walls!
But for me, the high point of the movie is a scene in which a mute woman is deliberately terrorized with the knowledge that she cannot scream. You know, it's really too bad that John Mahoney is no longer with us, because he would be perfect to play William Castle in a biopic. Number 12. Okay, remember when I said that Gojira was the best movie here with one possible exception? Here is that exception. And unlike Gojira, there is nothing surprising about how good it is.
Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves.
So I actually feel kind of bad putting it on a list with Plan 9 and the Giant Claw, but here it is anyway.
95, 100. Here I come, ready or not. What's wrong? Hey!
I don't want to say too much about this movie's story. You've probably seen it parodied and homaged here and there, with Robert Mitchum's character having love and hate tattooed on his knuckles. Again, Rocky Horror. I guess you could call this a kind of a serial killer movie, set in what I think is the 30s, and it's got this wonderful fairy tale quality to it. It's shot in a really stylized way, with these child protagonists, and it does a masterful job of immersing you in their world, and with that immersion comes absolute powerlessness.
It's a hard world for little things.
I would not be at all surprised if this movie were a major influence on Pan's Labyrinth. Because it was definitely an influence on Over the Garden Wall.
Little child with heart so brave, angel host will keep me safe.
But beyond that, I don't really want to say too much, because I want you to see it for yourself if you haven't already. Because with this movie, the suspense is worth it. Now, with most older horror movies, even the really good ones, you watch them and, you think, yeah, I could see how that would have been really scary at the time. That was fun. I'm glad I watched it. With this movie, though, there is no at the time. There is no I could see how. It just is scary. This movie is fucking scary. And also, it directly inspired the final scene of The Big Lebowski.
Lord, save little children. The wind blows and the rains are cold. Yet they abide.
The deed abides. I don't know about you, but I take comfort in that.
So, that's pretty cool. I want to thank everyone for humoring me for a few minutes while I go a little off-brand. Special thanks, of course, to all my Patreon supporters, particularly Michael Maris and Break System BSE. For the rest of the month, this channel will be devoted to Pre-Code Horror Comics Month.